Hi, my name is Melanie Srantos, and I'm an RIT undergraduate student studying chemical engineering. Today, I'm going to be talking about my research in exploring temperature-dependent conductivity models for carbon nanotube wires. I will first start off with giving an overview of carbon nanotube conductors. I will then go on to explain the different models that are used for carbon nanotube conductivity and resistivity. Next, I will be fitting these models to CNT data, and lastly, I will be drawing conclusions from these models and explaining my future works. Carbon nanotubes are being looked at for the many advantages they have over typical metallic conductors. These advantages include greater flexure tolerance, greater stability in a corrosive environment, little change in resistivity with changes in temperature, and most importantly, carbon nanotubes have a potential for higher conductivity than traditional metal wires. Because of these many advantages, CNTs have many different applications as well. They have been noted for viable replacements for metallic conductors in lab-scale demonstrations of coaxial, USB, and Ethernet cables. Furthermore, since they have a lower resistivity change with high temperature, CNTs have the potential to be used in motors, transformers, and generators. And lastly, since CNTs have a lighter mass than traditional metal wires, they have many aerospace applications as well. Carbon nanotube conductors, also known as CNTs, can be thought of as a rolled up graphene sheet. This is shown in this figure here, which exhibits a graphene sheet and a CNT. There are multiple different types of CNTs that can be made dependent upon the way that the sheet was rolled up, as well as the number of concentric sheets used. My data for this study was obtained through multi-wall CNTs. These double-walled and triple-wall CNTs shown here are examples of multi-walls. A carbon nanotube is an example of a ballistic conductor. A conductor will be ballistic if its mean free path is larger than the length of the conductor. A conductor's mean free path is the theoretical length that an electron could travel before colliding with something else, such as another electron or the wall of the conductor. This chart here shows how CNTs have a higher theoretical maximum conductivity and a lower temperature coefficient of resistance than other traditional metals, such as copper and aluminum, which are commonly used as metal wiring. Now, although single CNTs are ballistic conductors, going from tube to tube in bulk materials is where areas of resistance arrive. This bulk resistivity is what I focus my study on, and it is temperature dependent. By studying the resistivity of the CNTs and fitting them to models, different physical parameters can be understood, and therefore more conclusions can be drawn about how to improve the CNT's conductivity. It is important to understand the relationship between resistance, conductance, resistivity, and conductivity. Resistance, which is a measurement taken with a 4-point probe, as shown here, is equal to voltage divided by electrical current. This equation here is known as Ohm's law. Resistance is the inverse of conductance. Resistivity is calculated from resistance, but times the cross-sectional area of the CNT divided by the length of the CNT. Resistivity is inversely related to conductivity. This is important because when understanding the conductivity of a conductor, it is common practice to observe and look at its resistivity as a function of temperature, which is what I do in this study. In order to understand bulk conductivity, a major concept to understand is Joule heating, which is proportional to current times voltage or current squared times resistance. In short, Joule heating explains that more power equals higher temperature, which leads to greater resistance. The first model that I look at is the Kaiser CNT temperature-dependent conductivity model. This model can be split up into 3 main terms. The first term accounts for metallic phonon backscattering. The second term accounts for fluctuation-assisted tunneling, and the third term accounts for variable range hopping. Variables A, B, and H are related to the magnitude of each of these terms and their contribution to the model. I will be focusing mostly on TM, TB, and TS. Next, I use the Dinny model for resistivity. In the Dinny paper, they explain that there are 2 different types of curves. There's a type 1 curve and a type 2 curve. Based on the literature, I assume that our CNT data will most likely model a type 1 curve, since it fits into the group of CNT yarns made from a floating catalyst CVD growth process. I talk about 3 main wires in this study. Originally, roving was bought from Nanotube Technologies. This is known as received roving. My colleagues then vacuum dried this roving to greater than 100 degrees Celsius. After vacuum drying it, this becomes known as dried roving, and a portion of this was put off to the side and to be used as is. Some of the dried roving was taken and put through chemical vapor deposition. The process for that, the setup, is shown right here. Different masses of platinum precursor were deposited onto the roving, creating 2 more samples, a 5 milligram platinum precursor sample and a 25 milligram platinum precursor sample. These 3 samples are shown here with SEM images. Before getting into the comparison of the two different models, I would like to explain the importance of including a full range of temperature when looking at the conductivity for a CNT. Originally, I was only using data from 300 Kelvin to 700 Kelvin range. However, as can be seen here, that gives a very linear relationship for the data. However, when you expand the temperature range back to 80 Kelvin, it can be seen that the data is not linear and instead exhibits a curve. It is very important to fit the model to the curve in its entirety instead of focusing on different linear portions of the data. And therefore, the data was rerun with full temperature range samples going back from 80K. Now looking at the models. Overall, it can be seen that both models do fit this data fairly well. However, when quantifying this fit, it can be seen that the Kaiser model has a sum of squares residual value lower than the Dini model. And furthermore, the Kaiser model has a residual squared value closer to 1 than the Dini model. It is for these reasons that the conclusion was made that even though both models do give a good fit, the Kaiser model gives a better fit for this data, and therefore the Kaiser model is what I have used to model the data from here on out. Going back to what I explained on a previous slide about the Kaiser model, it consists of three main terms: metallic phonon backscattering, fluctuation-assisted tunneling, and variable range hopping. In order to determine which of these terms contributes the most to the conductivity of the CNT, I created different models including or not including certain terms. First, I removed the variable range hopping term, which is given by the red and the blue lines. As you can see, the red and blue lines are virtually identical fits. So even though I removed variable range hopping, it did not seem to affect the fit of the data. However, after removing the fluctuation-assisted tunneling term, it can be seen by this green line that the model very quickly loses its match to the data. This is also evident by such a low R-squared value. The conclusion is then made that both the metallic phonon backscattering and the fluctuation-assisted tunneling components are important to create a good model for the conductivity of the CNT. However, variable range hopping does not seem to be a contributor. These results were then repeated with the data obtained from the 5 milligram platinum precursor sample. Again, it is seen that by removing the variable range hopping term from the model, we achieved a nearly identical fit. However, after removing the fluctuation-assisted tunneling model term, it can be seen that the model quickly loses its fit to the data, which is also evident by, again, a very low R-squared value. The same conclusion is drawn, that the MPB and FAT terms must be included for a good fit, while the VRH term is not. These results are confirmed by being repeated for all three samples, including the 25 milligram precursor sample. By removing VRH, the model continues to have a good fit to the data. However, by removing the FAT term, the model loses its match, as evident by such a low R-squared value. The overall conclusion drawn from the varying Kaiser terms for each of these different models is that both the metallic phonon backscattering and the fluctuation-assisted tunneling terms are needed for a good fit, meaning that they are contributors to the CNT's conductivity. However, variable range hopping does not seem to be a contributor. Next, I delved into the different model parameters that were obtained when creating these Kaiser model fits. It is important to note that TM, TB, and TS all fall within their respective ranges that is suggested by literature. This is important to note because although a model can give a good fit to the data, it doesn't always give an accurate fit in terms of physical accuracy. Next, it can be seen that TB, the ratio of A to B, and the barrier energy all decrease as platinum precursor is added. The barrier energy was obtained by taking TB and multiplying it by Boltzmann's constant. And looking at these different model parameters and how they change with addition of platinum precursor, different conclusions can be drawn. First off, the ratio of A to B decreasing shows that the CNT is behaving more metallic. This is shown by the fact that A is a representation of the metallic phonon backscattering component, and B is a representation of the fluctuation-assisted tunneling component. Therefore, as the ratio decreases, the resistivity contribution from MPB is also decreasing. And lastly, by depositing platinum precursor through CVD, it has been shown that interconnectedness has been improved. This is shown by the fact that the barrier energy is decreasing as platinum precursor is added. This gives rise to the possibility for conductors with a higher conductivity to be created. In conclusion, there are many opportunities to develop advanced conductors using carbon nanotube materials and metal hybrid structures, as has been shown by this study. A full range of temperature data is needed for the model to give an accurate fit to the data, not just a good one. The Kaiser model has been shown to be a better fit to our data than the Dini model. In looking at the Kaiser model components, both metallic phonon backscattering and fluctuation-assisted tunneling are contributors to the CNT's conductivity. However, variable range hopping does not appear to be a contributor. As greater mass of the platinum precursor was deposited through CVD, the CNT exhibited more metallic behavior. Furthermore, by depositing the platinum precursor, we created an effective way to improve interconnectedness on the CNT. This is evident by the fact that the tunneling energy barrier decreased as platinum precursor was added, therefore giving rise to the ability to create conductors with higher conductivity potential. In the future, I hope to expand this study by exploring how depositing different metals through CVD impacts the CNT's resistivity. I would also like to explore at what mass of adding precursor do the benefits begin to plateau. And I would also like to look at other models of CNT temperature-dependent resistivity, such as those as presented by Lukawa-Rouse. I would like to thank the RIT Honor College for accepting me as a summer research scholar and for funding this research. I would also like to thank the US government and the Department of Energy for providing the funding that was used to develop the CNT samples. I would like to thank Dr. Brian Landy for being my advisor for this project. And I would also like to thank his team, specifically Anthony Legiro and Dylan McIntyre, for all of their help that they have provided me. I would like to thank Anthony Merrill for the image renderings that I have used in my presentation. And lastly, I would like to thank my family for supporting me as I completed my research remotely. Here's a full sheet of my references. Thank you very much for tuning in.